Sponsored by the Big 98, Nashville's #1 for new country and the home of the Bobby Bones Show.
The Rock Interview is on location at historic RCA Studio B, and who better to be here with than Grammy Award winner, let's see, and also I think recently inducted in the Musicians Hall of Fame by Garth Brooks. It is Steve Wariner.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, well, Thumb Pickers Hall of Fame. I can go on and on for days. CMAs, ACMs.
Glad to be with you today.
Good to see
This
you.
is so fun.
You know, last time we got to hang out was when Chris Stapleton rolled out his amplifier. But now also someone has a new guitar signature model by Gretsch.
I was telling Chris about this guitar that night because this thing's been in the works for 2 years. We were designing this. My son Ryan helped me design it, and Jeff Sin also had
incredible builder.
Both guys who just brought their own unique stuff to it. But I've been working on this for 2 years, and so yeah, I was telling everybody that night at Studio A we were talking about this, and I told Dave Cobb and Chris both. Of course, I ran into Chris at my sushi Thai place. Every time I go in there, he's there. So I go, man, the next time I'm just going to call you. We'll just meet here.
Yeah, well, you know,
always in there.
My favorite part about being at that whole deal with Chris and everything, and with you and with Brian White, was that you were telling me about all the moments with Chet and how he would like walk around the studio and come down. You were telling me how he would come in the studio when everybody was recording.
Well, that's, you know, this sounds kind of cliche and goofy maybe a little bit, but I get really moved in that place. And this place too, because I got a little history in Studio B,
right?
But I got a lot in Studio A. That was the most for me with RCA, my first label. When Chet signed me, that was my home at RCA Studio A. I was here. He brought me in here a little bit. I think he was testing me here second time I ever met him. I first met Chet Atkins in London, England in 1973, and I was touring with Dottie West, and it was an RCA cavalcade of stars, they called it, a bunch of RCA people, and Chet was the head of the label. He was doing he was closing like the last leg of that tour, and so I was like, oh my God, Chet Atkins, and I got to meet him in Holland and all over. I was hanging out with him a little bit, but I met him first in London, and then. Now fast forward a few years, and I met him. The second time I met him was in here. He had me come in and meet him. We were talking contracts, and I was trying to get him to sign me, you know.
Well, you know, and you've got such a great history too, and a lot of your fans may not know it, Steve. But you know, you were brought in by Dottie West as a bass player, but you were a multi-instrumentalist playing with your dad growing up.
Yeah, I played with my dad and my uncle, and when I was in the 5th, 6th grade, I was playing out with my dad, and he had cool bands.
What a great time.
Yeah, I played drums with my dad, or I had a set of drums, I'll put it that way. I tried to play, but I was playing with my uncle and my dad and different people around. My oldest brother, had a little rock band, and I played drums in that band. And we took longer. We sat around like what's that movie, That Thing You Do? We sat around trying to come up with a name more than we actually played shows, probably. But see, what are we going to call ourselves?
But then Dottie West is like, you know, Steve, you really need to come to Nashville.
Yeah, and I never will forget. I was on the bus talking to her and her drummer Byron Metcalf, who later they were married. He was the band leader. Wow. But I remember sitting on the bus talking to them, and Dottie said, can you come to Nashville and play bass, move down and play bass? We need a bass player. And I go, Dottie, I'm a senior in high school, you know. And I was 17.
And plus you were in the musical mecca of Kentucky already.
I was in a little town in Indiana at that time. Okay. At that time I was in a little town called Noblesville. It's kind of north side of Indy now, but I remember saying, I'm a senior in high school. She goes, you're kidding. And I go, I was a guitar player, but I jumped at the chance because she needed a bass player, and I go, yep, I can do that. Wow. She needed me to sing and play bass, and I go, I'm in. She had a real good guitar player named Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah.
And so I was the bass player.
Well, you know, I remember at the Country Music Hall of Fame where they had some of your music gear and everything there as well, including your bass. I'm like going, how cool. Yeah. And then when I got to see you play on stage at the Ryman with Tommy Emmanuel.
Oh, were you there? Yeah, that's
I was
right.
at that show, and you had Tommy, you, and I believe John Knowles. And so we had three certified guitar players on stage at one time. I think
we all showed up that night, didn't we?
And it was just amazing.
Paul Yandel and Jerry Reed and Chet would have been very proud of all of us guys. We're trying to represent those guys a little bit.
What a great legacy, though. And also, you know, with all your charity work also, with the Minnie Pearl Humanitarian Award.
Oh, man. Miss Minnie was one of my favorite people in the world. She would always walk up when I saw her. She did it to everybody, but I felt special. I knew she did it to everyone, but she would come up and go, have I told you lately that I love you? She always said that. And that was her favorite song, you know, Have I Told You Lately That I Love You?
And what a great lady.
She was a beautiful person, and her legacy lives on, you know, Sarah Cannon. I mean, the Cancer Foundation. And I do anything I can do for her cancer research and her foundation that I can do, you know, always.
You know what, another thing I have to bring up that really impressed me was the stuff you did back with Brad Paisley with Cluster Puck.
Yeah.
And I think that was another one of your Grammys, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. I've been fortunate to be presented with 4 Grammys, and all for playing
So they're just
mostly.
like falling all over the house? You like stumble over them sometimes?
You know, I'll say this, man. You're very kind. I have 4, but Chet called me once. Capitol Records called me, and the record I did called No More Mr. Nice Guy. We had a song that was nominated for a Grammy, and so and Brian White was on that track. It was called the Brickyard Boogie. Yeah. And Derek George and Brian Austin and Jeffrey Steele. We had all these cool guys playing, and I remember Capitol called and said, "You're nominated for a Grammy," and I go, oh, "That is awesome!" And then they go, "Well, don't get too excited. You're up against Chet Atkins, is who you're in the category." And I go, "Oh man,
not bad company."
So Chet calls me the night before the Grammys, and I was in New York, and Chet says, he leaves a message, and he says, "Steve, I just wanted you to know I voted for you." He said, I really did. He goes, I hope you win this. He goes, "I know you're up against me, but I hope you win it." Wow. And then he goes, that was so kind. And then he had to zing me at the end. He goes, "By the way, I've already got 16 of them anyway." Click, you know.
But that's so much fun. It's like everybody I have on shows, you know, from Leroy Parnell, everybody, they always rave about you and how much fun you are to be around and obviously to play guitar with.
Well, I love doing that, that's for sure. I rode back with Leroy the other day on a plane. I got to my gate in Austin coming home. Yeah. I go, "Oh my God, there's Leroy Parnell at my gate." And him and Lisa, and we flew. I sat with him. We sat and talked the whole flight. The flight felt like it was 2 minutes long, you know, with them.
How incredible.
It was fun.
Well, now, besides having a signature model Gretsch guitar, which you do now, what are the other big plans for 2020? Anything any new music?
That's a wonderful question to ask. One thing I'm working on right now is something that is so cool. One of my heroes, Felix Cavallari, we just wrote a cool song together. He's working on a new project. Wow. And he asked me, I'm thrilled, he asked me to work on a project with him on this particular tune. We wrote a cool song. Mike Sievers is producing, we 3 wrote this cool song, and hearing his voice is just like magic, the Rascals, and so he was out at my studio not too long ago, and we kind of were writing and filling in some holes and working on it a little bit. He's just tremendous.
So maybe some new music and stuff coming out in 2020?
Oh, definitely. I wrote a couple of new tunes lately. I've been writing a lot. I got some new stuff I've been writing. Really? I wrote a new little instrumental piece. I'm dying to get it, but I just have it in my meat computer right now. But I need to put it down before I forget it. But it represents this trip I went on when we went through 4 buses. Before we even left town, they called and said, "Yeah, we're sending you another bus. This one's not going to make it. It don't work." So they brought us another one. Then that bus broke down the next day. Anyway, a series of events. So I had to write this song called "The 4 Bus Breakdown." And I'm dying to. It's a lot of, you know.
Because you have time switching buses. You are just amazing.
You know, all that kind of fast finger roll stuff. So I'm dying to get in and record that. So
well, it's so funny too, Steve, that one genre of music cannot contain you. To where I understand that you also even worked with Dave Mustaine.
Man, I love Dave Mustaine.
How did that work out?
People ask me all the time, and I go, this is the weirdest thing. But I didn't even play guitar. I played steel guitar.
I know. I read that. I'm like going, steel guitar?
Well, Dave called, and beautiful guy, by the way. I love Dave. We hit it right off, and he called and said, "I'm needing steel guitar on this track." And I'm going, "Really? Do you really need it?" Yeah, serious? But
you're like going into the closet, "Hey, look, I've got one."
He said, "I heard you play," and I go, "Well, I'm a hack steel player, but I know some really good ones in this town." And he goes, "No, why don't you bring your steel and come down?" So here I go with my Emmons, and I go down, and I worked up these parts, and
how amazing is that?
I know. So everybody, I love it. Right around that time, everybody would say, "What have you been up to?" And I go, "Oh, not much. Just recorded with Dave Mustaine, and Megadeth."
Megadeth.
Go, what?
Yeah. When I'm not out playing with Vince Gill or whomever else, because you and Vince always end up trading licks too.
We do a lot. Yeah, we do. He's incredible, and I love
As
playing with Vince. Thank you. I love playing with Vince, and he's. there's so many great players in this town.
Yeah.
I mean, golly, you know.
That's why you fit right in.
It's I don't know. I'm hoping I do.
Lot of
sometime
history.
A little bit. So it sure is fun, though. It's fun to play and get to do a lot of things. You know, write, play, go to the Opry. I'm playing the Opry tomorrow night.
You know, I
at the
love seeing you. I
Ryman.
love seeing you on the Opry every time.
Thanks. I love doing it at the Ryman.
I also enjoy the jokes because you always throw out a joke of some sort before you get going, and I'm like, you know, I'm just laughing away.
It's my
back
tip of the hat to little Jimmy. You know,
which somebody's got to do it.
Or you know, there's so many of those guys. Mike Snyder out there
Right.
kills me. Yeah. You know, he's so irreverent. You know that it's insane. Gary Muledeer, my buddy, he's out there a lot now, and Henry Cho, and those are the real
I
guys.
tell you what, you got some good friends to hang out
That's
with.
fun, man. It's you know, I'm a blessed guy, really. So.
Wow. I'll tell you what, we're so thrilled you're still making music. Follow him on his website, social media, everything else. Obviously, you can check out the brand new signature model, Gretsch guitar. This is the Nashville
The
Gentlemen.
Nashville Gentlemen.
Says so on the headstock, along with Steve's name up here too, Steve Wariner. And so, man, I'll tell you what, congrats on everything, and here's to a great 2020 with you also, right here in historic RCA Studio B.
A lot of history here. Eric, thank you so much.
Thank you
I
so much.
appreciate it.
Thanks for watching the Rock and Review.
Sponsored by the Big 98, Nashville's #1 for new country and the home of the Bobby Bones Show.